How do we make sense of what it is that we're called to do with our stuff, with our money, with our possessions? What Satan is seeking to do is to subtly, slowly pull us away from the life that we are called to live over time. We're stuck trying to do the things that our society expects us to do. And somewhere along the way, kind of sprinkle a little bit of Jesus on top of it. This all stems from what you believe about God. If Satan is at work widening that gap, then our role, our job is to bridge that gap.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Purpose-Filled Money Podcast. We are your hosts, Courtney and Caleb Sams, and it's been a minute since we've recorded. We took like a hiatus there for a
Unintentional.
few months. Yeah,
you know?
Things just got ahead of us, and
we have like the natural ebbs and flows of like the financial planning cycle of life, and then just random family things happening, and
yeah,
we had all the intentions,
but none of the execution.
Yeah.
So, but the mission of this was never abandoned. And so we're going to get back on track, and that's just kind of the human experience at this point for us. And so just because we don't do it every week or every other week like we intend doesn't mean we give up entirely. So here we are.
So if you haven't listened in a while, which would just make an abundance of sense.
Yes.
Where we ended the last episode, and what we're trying to do in this very spread out section, is we just spent a handful of episodes looking at Joseph and looking at his life, looking at the principles of his character, and what we're trying to do is kind of backwards walk our way through the patriarchs. And the question at the core of this series is, why is God continuing to choose this family to partner with? And what we're hoping to determine is the answer to that question. You can or at least maybe an answer to that question of why is God using Joseph, can pull out for us personal traits or characteristics about Joseph that we could potentially then implement in our own lives. And what does that teach us about the fundamental side of what are we trying to do with our money in honoring God? What about these four men and their lives can spread into what it is we're doing?
Yeah. Obviously, they have some tangible traits that God values.
And they're all completely flawless individuals.
Yeah.
That have never made any mistakes and have no issues whatsoever, no family problems, no trust issues, no...
Yeah, this is a dumpster fire of a family. It's like Abraham was pretty good. He had some flaws. Then you have Isaac, who's like pretty good. And then you hit Jacob, which is just like it makes you question why. Like, why is God going down this path? You had two brothers. Like, why did God even give? And we're going to get into this. Rebecca, this promise, this vision of him, and we're going to get into it, and it's going to...
It feels like in the literal middle of Genesis, there's this record scratch.
Yes.
Where, and we'll do more of a dive in the next sections, right? As we talk more about Isaac and then Abraham. But you're right. It feels like their lives, while they have some hiccups, seem to flow with this generous, hospitable, servant-hearted version of the people that God is trying to cultivate to bless the earth, right? That's the original promise that, God's going to make Abraham a nation, a great nation, but it's through that nation he's going to bless the rest of the world. And Abraham and Isaac's lives seem to match up with that. And then Jacob hits the scene, and it almost becomes this image of smoke and mirrors, where you're looking through, trying to figure out, okay, God, how are you going to make this work? This doesn't add up. every time it seems like Jacob makes a decision over and over and over again, you're like, well, that probably wasn't the right way to do that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's just it'll be an interesting study. And again, I think we've said this before. This is not entirely like taking apart these people's characters and gleaning what's good about them, what's bad about them, and stuff like that. Like, it's not just isolated to how can you do this with your finances. Like, this is God partners with people for a reason, and these people are flawed, but they have some really good things, and so do you. And so we're just going to tie that into how can we be better stewards of what God's left in our possession. But
Yeah.
if you feel like a black sheep of the family and that you constantly mess up, then you might feel a lot of hope in these last few ones, because Jacob just tends to constantly be I don't know, like failing upwards at this point. So
without further ado,
yeah,
with an effort to keep this episode remotely, digestible, I'll read for us, and we're going to walk through in this episode chapters 25, 27, and 28. And we won't read verse through verse, but trying to get this kind of first maybe section of Jacob's life. And so we'll start here at the very beginning, starting in verse 19 of 25. This is the account of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Abraham became the father of Isaac. When Isaac was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean, from Padan Aram, and the sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. But the children struggled inside her, and she said, "If it is going to be like this, I'm not so sure I want to be pregnant." So she asked the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples will be separated from within you. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When the time came for Rebekah to give birth, there were twins in her womb. The first came out reddish all over like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. When his brother came out with his hand clutching Esau's heel, they named him Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. And there is so much just happening just in these first few verses of this narrative of pregnancy and birth and naming that I think just sets the scene for the totality of Jacob's life.
mm-hmm. I think one thing, I mean, there's a lot, but in here, I find it very interesting. It's something that I kind of just thought about how different these twins were. Like, you have one that basically comes out looking like an animal.
Yeah.
All already.
Yeah.
And then the other one, and it sets the stage for how different they are throughout their life.
And we didn't even talk about this as we were like prepping for this episode, but the constant theme of Jacob's life, and I didn't even notice that it shows up at the literal beginning of his life before he's even born, is wrestling. Mm-hmm. Like in verse 22, these kids are wrestling inside her. I just think it's so interesting. And yeah, you talk about the difference between the two of them. There's so much happening in the descriptions and in their names and in the language that's being used. So like for Esau, when you've got these two nations that are going to come out of Rebekah, you've got the Edomites that are coming, and both this idea of him being red and hairy are kind of like language play on words. And I've said this before on this podcast, I'm not some Hebrew expert, not even at all. But and so I'm not even going to try to say the words, but look them up. And they're both kind of play on the name Edom and Edomites, as well as where the Edomites kind of ended up settling in the words reddish and hairy. And so there's already some kind of, I don't know if it's subversive prophetic stuff happening or, what's going on. And then even in the description of their birth, Esau's birth kind of happens, which I think is fair to say that that's typical.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that necessarily stands out in the fact that Esau seems to be a pretty passive participant in his birth.
Babies don't typically have a active
Like a
role
massive
in
role
it.
to play. I'll let you
Yeah.
be the expert in that. But so I don't mean it to stand out in itself, but in comparison to Jacob's birth, I think the writer is very intentionally putting the two in opposition. That while Esau's birth maybe is normal, is it even its own interesting point, and that Esau's a naturally passive baby in this experience who has some stark characteristics about him. Jacob's birth is incredibly opposite of that.
He's not even coming out the right way.
Yeah. He's clearly coming. Yeah, he's got his hand is grasping the heel.
His arm's above his head,
Yeah.
and so he's already overreaching.
And the author's trying to show us how immensely active he is.
Yeah.
In this moment, and then he's named Jacob, right? And you've got all this stuff around his hands clutching Esau's heel, and if you've done any kind of studying in Jacob, or if you've heard ministers preaching about it, like the name Jacob has a lot of weight to it, and oftentimes it has this connotation of heel grabber, or sometimes even more intentionally this connotation of intentional, like deception, the deceiver. And one of the things I found interesting in studying for this, listening to some episodes from another podcast, and I've really become enamored with the New English translation and their notes on the language of the text. And again, as someone who's not a scholar here, I'm putting a lot of faith in some of this stuff, and it could be that there's better scholarship out there. But that the name Jacob there originally probably doesn't carry much negative connotation. That heel grabber probably has more to do with, and the name Jacob referring to the one who protects, and this language that like Jacob would have been the one that would have come around the back and guarded the heel, like, and protected from the rear. And I think you saw somewhere where there was even, another word of it also might lend itself to like this overreacher, this overachiever, maybe.
Yeah. And yeah, just like this idea of overextending or overreaching, or like I think of like when you tell Lily to, like, our daughter to, like, here's the line, don't go past it, and like she's the one that will like stand on it and stuff. Like she's just like the pusher of the boundaries almost.
Yeah. And there's a thing that happens so if wrestling is a theme of Jacob's life, his name is as well. I mean, he's the famous, and we'll get to this scene, not in this episode, but where God changes his name. But Jacob and Esau have a similar experience where later on in the next story that we find them in, Esau doesn't change his name, but sort of redefines it. And I think that's where we've layered all of this negative connotation on. And so I think the main things we're trying to do in this little piece of their story is understand what the author's attempting to do. There's a lot of literary devices and intentional language being used to kind of design this family, and to start to see who these characters are in Esau and Jacob and in Rebecca. And obviously Isaac plays a part in this life too. But as we go forward in this episode, I think we're going to see some of Rebecca's choices and naturally kind of go, I don't know about that. And I think it's important to couch her decisions and her actions in the context of this, call it a vision, call it an oracle, this word that the Lord has given her, and her faith in at least the fact that what God has said is true. I think Rebecca's going to wrestle with, like, okay, if God has said it's true, it's going to happen. Doesn't necessarily require you to go about doing it. But she's still, it seems abundantly clear that she's taken what God has said to heart, and in as much that she's willing to prolong and preserve and push that idea that, look, the older is going to serve the younger. One of these nations is going to be stronger than the other. And that clearly, like, I mean, as soon as they're born, you know who they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, when she hears that and then she sees Jacob, like, grabbing the heel and stuff, like, how much of a confirmation of that is, like, God said this to me, and then this kid is basically nailing the like, hitting the nail on the head of, like, you're the one that is going to, I don't want to say like usurp or whatever, but can't think of a better word.
Yeah.
So do we want to keep reading?
Yeah. So we'll just keep on finishing up the chapter there. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the open fields. But Jacob was an even-tempered man, living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for fresh game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now Jacob cooked some stew, and when Esau came in from the open fields, he was famished. So Esau said to Jacob, "Feed me some of the red stuff. Yes, this red stuff, because I'm starving." That is why he was also called Edom. But Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." "Look," said Esau, "I'm about to die. What use is this birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear an oath to me now." So Esau swore an oath to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Esau ate and drank, then got up and went out. So Esau despised his birthright.
So a couple of things that just don't sit well with me in this thing, or I guess either don't sit well or I have questions about. The thing that does not sit well with me is this thing where it's almost like the family's like teamed up. Like, I don't think that there's anything more dysfunctional in a family than like a dad picking his favorite and a mom picking her favorite and basically using them as pawns against each other. And really, like, Isaac is a pretty passive, I guess, player in that game, but like Rebecca to me just at this time isn't screaming mother of the year. It's like she is actively not just like hoping Esau fails, but like, I don't know, it's just this weird thing of like, she just, there's no, I don't see a lot of her protecting Esau through this. And you'll see it more in the story, but it's just like a, and it doesn't even come up here. That's just a weird thing for me family wise, that like Isaac loved Esau, Rebecca loved Jacob, and that's just that's a hard thing for me to wrestle with, because I mean, I have one kid. I don't have to like divide my allegiance now, but like I would just assume that if I have another one, I don't have to like not love one to love the other. I just don't think that's how that works. But
and so the author's doing this intention, like this wedge is continuing to be pushed in between these two boys. And even in their descriptions here of, Esau's this skilled hunter, a man of the open fields, the language here almost produces a restlessness, an unquenchable thirst for this thing, and then it juxtaposes that with this even-tempered content to just be at home. And some scholars have suggested that those two kind of dividing descriptors is one example that comes to mind that as I was studying this, I thought, I don't think we've talked about this, is that same kind of divide we see with like Martha and Mary, right? And Jesus shows up, and you've got this immediate division between, like, there's stuff that's got to get done, and there's tasks that need to be done, and will you tell her, like, get up and help me? And Jesus is like, no, she's right where she's supposed to be. And some scholars have pointed to almost a similar kind of divide here between Esau and Jacob, that Jacob was maybe more intent on being at home, more intent on being in tune with like studies and like their religion, their devotion to this God that that has taken them in. And I think the main point here, whether or not that's ultimately true, is what they're trying to show you is, man, as they grow, they're continuing to be pushed further and further apart, both in their own distinctive personalities and the things they do and the things that they like and their temperaments, but also in, you're right, like this favoritism that's showing up
The
on both
favoritism,
sides.
their recreational
Yeah.
activities, like
Yeah.
stuff like that. Like they could not be more different.
Yeah.
The other thing that I just find very weird is that you just keep seeing the word red come up.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything like, do you know if red is like a thing?
Well, so that's what I was saying at the birth is, and again, I don't want to overstep my limited abilities, but the word there for red, the whatever the word is, sounds very much like the word for Edom. Like,
Okay.
and it's that kind of play on words of like what Esau's future is going to look like when he still in his own right becomes a great nation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems to me that Esau's coming into the house and Jacob is cooking.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it is the best soup on the planet.
Sure.
Do they not have any other food in this house? Like,
Right.
is it just like this idea of Esau can't walk 5 feet to the pantry?
Yeah.
Or something like it just.
He's returning from a hunt.
He's returning
Like,
from a hunt.
how long would it take him to throw something on the fire? Right.
He obviously knows. I mean, because you're going to see he knows how to hunt and kill and cook for himself. He does it for Isaac. And so it's just like I have a lot of questions about this because to me, it does not seem realistic for someone to come in. Again, I've never hunted. Camping to me is a motel.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I'm so far away from being able to empathize with this. But it just seems very unrealistic that someone walks into a house where someone is actively cooking and doesn't just grab the loaf of bread that's offered to them. So, like, and I don't even know what to pull from that. It's just weird to me that he comes in and has this.
This is the only option available.
This is the only option available. But something that I think is like the first pulling from Jacob that we see is the very first thing. It's not like we think of Jacob as a trickster, as a deceiver, as this master manipulator. But the very first thing he says when Esau asks for something, like this isn't a spur of the moment thought for him. Yeah. This is something that he's been thinking of for a while, and it's why he says it.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's something that, like, I don't know. I just think that it's something where he's been wanting that birthright.
Yeah.
He hasn't, I guess, not that we know of up until this point. It's not like he starved Esau in a closet somewhere and like forced him to give it over. It was just,
it makes you wonder how deep his scheme ran though, right? Like, as you're asking, like, is this the only thing? Maybe it is. Maybe Jacob's emptied out the cupboards, right?
Maybe he's
and made it to where this is it.
Yeah.
You're either eating this or you're going to go through all the things you're going to have to do to prepare that food to like, and that's going to take you a while. You're going to have to bleed whatever you just killed and then prepare it, cook it, and that's going to take you a minute. And who knows, the language that Esau uses of I'm famished, I'm about to die. Like, it feels like there's just so much heightened drama in this scene that you're just wondering, like, are these just two guys that are just going back and forth with one another, or is it real? Like, has Esau stayed out longer than he should? Has he gotten lost along the way and he's finally wandered home? Like, what's the scene? But whatever the scene is, whether it's completely step by step, like Jacob has aligned the dominoes to fall exactly how he wants them to, or it's this happenstance moment where Esau has just found himself in this terrible situation. Your point remains, whether it's option A or B, Jacob's readiness to seize this opportunity to go, okay, this is the time that I'm going to make this ask.
Because the other thing is that Esau doesn't even try to barter.
Yeah.
He just says, all right, like my birthright for that soup, great, give it to me. Like, could he not have said like, no, maybe not my birthright per se, but like I'll do your laundry for a week,
right.
or like just something that's just not as extreme.
They seem so disproportionate in value.
I mean, the only thing that I can equate this to is like someone coming in and saying like, I'm so hungry, can you give me that? And I'm like, yeah, give me your house and I'll give you this. Like,
and I don't even know if that's close, because like something that I think is important to know about the birthright in their world is the older son, and in their scenario, just apparently the son who holds the birthright at the end of the day, the main heir, right, that would take on the father's role after he passes. It came with so much stuff attached to it. And one of the main ones you could think about would just be simply the inheritance, right? And so the birthright would receive a double portion of inheritance. And the easiest way to figure that out is if there are 4 sons, right? They would split the father's inheritance up into 5 portions, and the firstborn would get 2 portions. If it's 2 sons, like in this scenario, they'd split it 3 ways, and the first son would get 2 portions. And so there's this massive financial incentive, this massive benefit of literally being double what Esau, what Jacob sees an opportunity. But it's so much more than just this financial piece of an inheritance. The birthright carries so much responsibility to it.
It's why you even have twice the amount.
Yeah.
Is because it's not like you get twice the amount so you can get a bigger car or something. It's like you have twice the amount because it's on you to take care of the family. If they are in need. Like you just have, like you're supposed to use that money for the family, not necessarily for
you
yourself.
See some of this dynamic play out a little bit more in uniquely throughout the story of Ruth, and all the ways that they have these different, who's the heir, who's the husband that's supposed to step in, all this kind of stuff. This cultural context is dripped in. The birthright means you are going to follow in the footsteps of the father and take on the mission of the family. Every other son at the table could go off and do their own thing. They could leave and start their own little combined family over here and do their own mission, their own goals. But the heir, the firstborn, doesn't have the freedom to do that. And something that stands out about the story of Jacob and Esau in this moment is Jacob and Esau both have to know that.
Yeah.
And it's more for them than just the double portion of inheritance, the double portion of responsibility. They know they are the 3rd generation of the promise of Yahweh, who has done all these things, who has promised Abraham and their father Isaac. And the assumption would be, if this continuing trend goes on, that would promise the birthright. And so the fact that Jacob is aware of this and is actively seeking it out, and inversely, the fact that Esau is aware of this and is so
quick.
He seems to hold it in such low esteem.
Yeah.
That it isn't something worth keeping. It's not something worth staking a claim on. It's not something worth risking loss or suffering for. That literally, like the author can't be more clear, that for a bowl of soup, you would trade the promises of God, the role for your father, the station in your family. Like the weight of this immeasured distance between these two things cannot be over-exaggerated.
And the idea that Esau seems more aligned with Isaac. It's like Esau is kind of laid out to have this relationship with his father. And so it would almost make more sense for someone to like just kind of like flippantly give up their birthright if they weren't so close to their father.
Yeah.
But it's just like you have someone that is like his, what is happening on my screen?
You just made some fireworks show up.
If you're watching this on on YouTube or whatever this is, a bunch of fireworks just went off.
We have a Zoom call on Thursday nights for our Sunday school class that I teach with a couple of guys at church, and we try to get together every week to kind of just figure out what's going on, where we're at. And mine is not one of them, but I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the computer they're on or what, but like a couple of their Zooms are capable of doing different like things. And I can't tell you how many times we have gotten lost in like one of them will accidentally do something that will set something off. And then 20 minutes later, the six of us are sitting there all trying to do things. And we've completely lost our way. And yeah, it's thumbs up, it's balloons, it's fire. It's crazy.
Yeah. I don't know what I did.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I said something.
Yeah.
Anyways.
But ultimately, I think what we're seeing, what we're starting to see, and as we ask the question, like, why, God, are you continuing to take someone like Jacob forward? Especially, we might not even get into it that much in this episode, but over the next few moments we talk about Jacob, the amount of deception that's going on in his story, and it will happen here in a minute. But like, God, how are you partnering with this? I think this scene starts to really set the stage for that you have to think, at least on some level, both Esau and Jacob are aware of what God has promised Isaac. And Esau seems on some level to not care about that at all. And Jacob, beyond simply caring about it, beyond simply valuing it, is actively reaching for it.
Yes, he's seizing the opportunities when they are made available to him because it's at the forefront of his mind. He has a goal and a dream, and it's quick thinking. Like, it's not something that like you have to be actively just kind of like this is on his vision board, and it's at the very, very top, and he looks at it every single day. And so when the opportunity arises, he's ready for it. And I think that that's a lot of like, that's what God is asking of us, is to have his mission at the forefront of his mind. And when he presents us with the opportunities to seize, we're ready and we're able to do it because we're not distracted and we're not off course and we're not, we're just present in the moment and not just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not saying to let someone starve. But I think there's just more to this.
Yeah. So you jump ahead to chapter 27 there, and it's interesting. And we'll probably talk about this more with Isaac. Like, the author kind of does this weird thing where this chapter 26 is just like forced into the middle of this story, and it's all about Isaac in the midst of this Jacob narrative. And I think it's interesting what both 25 and 27 hold against 26. And again, we'll do more of that with Isaac's story, but we're not going to read from 27. We'll get to 28 and read a little bit of it, but the story most likely. If you don't, go read 27. There's this story of these blessings and this just immense amount of deception. And now Rebecca's involved and is giving Jacob pointers and is helping him put on his Esau costume and all these things to make sure that Isaac gives Jacob the blessing that is meant for Esau. And it leads to, like, I think if we're reading this today and we're being honest with ourselves, it leads to so many questions of like, why is this scene as important as the story clearly makes it? Like, why can't, once Isaac realizes because Esau shows up, right? Even in the midst of what he does with Jacob, one of the things he says to Jacob is, how'd you get back so quickly, when he thinks it's Esau? And once this is realized, like my mind goes to like, okay, well, why can't we just like, okay, everybody forget what I just said. Jacob, I take it back. Esau, get in here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the blessing that I was supposed to tell you the first I gave to Jacob, but we'll give it to you now. Like none of that happens. And I think you can find the reasoning back all the way back to their beginning moments of their birth stories and their intentional use of words, their intentional value. Like this is not some blessing that Isaac has just kind of whipped up on the spot for Esau. This is a blessing that he's probably crafted and wrestled with and prayed about and revised for a long time. And this their cultural context of when I give you this blessing, it's going to go out into the world and I can't bring it back in. Like once you've been blessed here, this is for you. And I just think it's just such an interesting kind of concept. The belief they have in their power of words. And then Esau shows up and he has the whole like, well, did you only have one blessing? Like,
Yeah.
Don't you have something for me?
And he basically, like his dad, it almost seems like a curse at this point.
It's not much of a blessing.
It's not a blessing. He says like the opposite of what he gave to.
Yeah. It's a good thing he spent some time thinking about the original blessing, because if he was just doing it off the fly both times, seems like he was pretty bad at it.
It also makes me think, and this is something that I just saw, but in verse 29, in the middle of the blessing, it says, be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. That to me sounds like if he's thinking that this is Esau, that
he's almost trying to reverse.
He's almost trying to like reverse what Jacob did to him.
Yeah. And so the thing that I think the author does here that's interesting a couple of different times is we're limited in knowing who all knows what, right? Like we're not told that when Rebecca is given her word at the beginning of her pregnancy from God, we're not told that she tells Isaac.
Yeah.
We're not told that she tells the boys as they've grown up. Like we don't know. We can assume one way or the other. You can read into it how you want, but all the author gives us is we know Rebecca knows.
Right.
And who else she involves in that knowledge is kind of left to the reader's interpretation. It's the same idea with the birthright story. Jacob and Esau have this moment. He goes, swear an oath to me, which again takes us back to the power of words, right? Like they didn't have some attorney draw up and draft some contractual agreement.
Yeah.
But the author doesn't clue us in as to are Isaac and Rebecca aware that this exchange has taken place? Like we don't know.
And does Isaac have like any say in it?
Yeah.
I mean, just because so it's just stuff that we don't know. We don't know who's involved. And just because this is so far removed from our culture, it's very hard for us to empathize with. So
the stage is set at the end of this, that Esau's left there holding this. Blessing's probably not the right word. And he says that he hates his brother and he wants to kill him. And he has this private moment. The author tells us, he says, the time of mourning my father is near, but afterwards I will kill my brother Jacob. And Rebecca hears it. And another moment where, and again, I think we should paint everything Rebecca does in the context of this word that she gets from the Lord. But another moment where Rebecca's just taking action into her own hands, and maybe at a lack of trust to some degree. She basically comes to Isaac and kind of spins a tale of like, I don't want Jacob to end up with any of these people. If I see him marry one of these women, it would kill me. Please send him to my brother Laban, to the land of Haran. Let him go there. Let him find a wife. And really, it's all just cloaked in this. She knows she needs to get Jacob away from Esau, because as soon as Isaac's out of the picture, Esau has blood intent. And I think it's interesting that it's this same land that, and we'll see this come up in the next couple episodes, and we're going to wrap this up relatively quickly, that Isaac is specifically told by Abraham not to go back to Haran.
Yeah.
And here's Rebecca a few chapters later going, bless him and send him to Haran. And what we want to do here, I think, you get this next scene in chapter 28, and there's these three dialogues basically that are kind of happening at three separate times. But you get a secondary blessing from Isaac to Jacob. Then, as Jacob's on his way, he has the vision. You know, you've seen the Jacob's ladder vision, and God says something to him in the midst of that dream. And then Jacob responds. And I'm going to read to you those three different dialogues. We'll end our episode there, and it kind of sets the stage for this massive deception off that Jacob's about to spend a few chapters going toe to toe with Laban here. But going back to 28, reading, like I said, these three sections. So the first one's verses 3 and 4. This is Isaac blessing Jacob again. May the sovereign God bless you. May he make you fruitful and give you a multitude of descendants. Then you will become a large nation. May he give you and your descendants the blessing he gave to Abraham, so that you may possess the land God gave to Abraham, the land where you have been living as a temporary resident. So Isaac sends him on his way. Then he has this dream vision. And in the midst of the dream, God says this as he stands at the top of the ladder in verse 13. I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the ground you're lying on. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west, east, north, and south. All the families of the earth will pronounce blessings on one another, using your name and that of your descendants. I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. And then Jacob's response here in verse 20. Jacob made a vow saying, if God is with me and protects me on this journey I am taking, and gives me food to eat and clothing to wear, and I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will become my God. Then this stone that I have set up as a sacred stone will be the house of God, and I will surely give you back a tenth of everything you give me. And I think we just want to do here quickly, because it's been longer than we thought, is to try and kind of understand these three different moments as Isaac is blessing Jacob as he leaves, and he kind of just reiterates the blessing that
He's
God
like
is
passing the baton.
Yeah.
Like this is the line that the family of God is going through. And so he's like passing this like the blessing of Abraham on to Jacob now.
Yeah. And then this moment happens where Jacob has this dream, and God basically reinforces it. Yeah. Like, here's who I am. Here's what I'm going to do to you. Here's what I'm going to do for you. I am the Lord your God. I am with you. I will protect you. I'll bring you back. I'll make you all the things. And I think Jacob's reaction is so interesting to his character design. Jacob does two things that I think are super important for us to resonate on, because it shows us here that Jacob's not yet ready. The first thing he does is he kind of throws an if-then statement back at God. God's already told him, I'm with you, I'm going to protect you, I'm going to bring you back. If you go back and you look at chapter 27, there's a moment in conversation with Isaac where Jacob basically refers to the Lord your God. Mm-hmm. Talking to Isaac about God. Like, this is your God. And Jacob's response here is still in this kind of weird, grasping, okay, God, prove it.
This is like, to me, like when we were prepping for this and Caleb read this out loud, I had read this, and in my first interpretation of this was Jacob is claiming God here, but he's not. The audacity for, like, when this was given, and I don't know where it was, but I think when this was given to Abraham, and God essentially said the exact same thing to Abraham, Abraham was like, you are my God.
Yeah.
Like, and he immediately like took that on. But just the audacity for Jacob to basically barter with God and make him prove himself, and then say, like, if you do all of this stuff, then you will be my God. to me is just how God did not just smite him.
And the second thing he does in the midst of that if statement is he adds to what God said.
Yeah.
Now, I think what God said probably leaves some room for implication, but Jacob line items it out. And he goes, you got to protect me. You got to give me food, clothing to wear, which is not mentioned. Yeah. Now, again, I think in God's provision, it's probably understood, but Jacob takes God's words and goes, yeah, protect me and give me food,
provide
give
for
me
me,
clothes, give me provision, and bring me home safely. Then you can be my God. Yeah. And one of the things I think we're going to try to, as we kind of land the plane here, one of the things I hope you're starting to see about Jacob, yes, is flaws and ambition and arrogance, but between the birthright, the blessing, and even in this interaction with God himself, Jacob's willingness to reach out and grab what he sees value in, I think is starting to paint the picture of the person that God wants to work with. We will, I think, throughout the rest of his life, see this over and over and over again. And we'll probably expand on it more. But for now, just spend some time, in between this episode and the next. Maybe going back over these handful of chapters of Jacob's beginning story, wrestling with who Jacob is, and asking the question for yourself, God, why? What about Jacob? Mm-hmm. Were you willing to partner with? And what about that can I learn for myself? Next time, like I said, we'll dive into Laban's crossed wires.
Yeah. And hopefully the next episode of this won't be in 5 months.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
All right. Y'all, we'll see y'all later. Bye.